Welcome to Tech Leader 360.
We were able to convince Bill Gates.
Effective leaders understand the weight of what their leadership is, but they don't recognize it in themselves.
In my experience, stories change culture.
Why are you going to all these Muslim countries? Are you a drug smuggler?
And there was an entrepreneur there that was talking about product market fit.
What made you to leave the Microsoft?
I was doing well at Microsoft.
Can you talk about leadership experience in nonprofits?
Leadership happens top down, side to side, bottom up.
Do you empower your staff or do you micromanage your staff?
It would be foolish.
All of these people, whether it's Satya Nadella or Bill Gates or Steve Ballmer, Paul Moritz, I mean, they're just endless number of people who kind of gave you time. And with that time, you actually learn things.
Leaders have built their own stories. Tomorrow, you can build your own story. Use Tech Leader 360 as your reference tool to build your leadership journey.
If you are a software engineer or a data scientist or a solution architect or any IT professional, this is for you. So today we have a great guest with us. Her name is Patricia Bothwell, and she is working at GoGuardian, which is a unicorn company, and she's working as a VP. Please join with me to welcome Patricia Bothwell. Patricia, welcome to our podcast. Thank you very much.
I'm delighted to be here, Jagan.
Thank you very
so
much.
much for inviting me.
Thank you very much, Patricia. First of all, before we go deep dive into this podcast, Patricia, I wanted to ask you a couple of things. So what is your experience overall this entire podcast?
Oh, this is fantastic. When you asked me, hey, Patricia, would you be on my podcast? I was touched. I was honored. And I'm impressed. This is a serious enterprise. Of course, Jagan is a serious business person, and I expect a certain level of formality and polish. Perhaps, as always, you've gone above and beyond, sir.
Oh, thank you very much, Patricia. Yeah, I met you in Harvard Business School alumni club, and I know that is where the connection has established. And first of all, thank you very much for accepting and coming to this podcast, Patricia.
Of course, my pleasure. You're so much fun to talk to in coffee shops, at receptions, wherever. I had a feeling that sitting down and having a nice chat, albeit with cameras, would be similarly fun.
Let's go deep dive into this podcast.
Yeah.
First of all, the two primary objectives is one is that we wanted to hear your stories, people like successful people, technology leaders who have created a lot of impact to the community in the form of building a digital transformations and all the stuff. So in that lines, so we wanted to take those stories, number one. Number two is that we also wanted to inspire the aspiring tech leaders. So this is the overall objective of this podcast, Patricia. So since you have done an amazing job at the current GoGuardian, so before we go deep dive into that GoGuardian, so can you talk about your personal background in terms of how did you become a Patricia and started working? Hope you understand.
Absolutely. How did I become Patricia? Well, I was born in the Philippines, moved at a young age to New York. So I'm a Long Islander. I may not have the hair and nails, but I think of myself as a New Yorker. I was raised by my mom and around a set of strong, successful women. Her sisters, her mother, our pastor, all very influential in my life growing up. And I was fortunate to never think, I can't do something. There was always this sense of, I'm going to do that. The universe may not necessarily be 100% supportive, but if it's something I want to do, I can figure out a way. Let's go.
I see.
And in school, and outside of school, I'm a big nerd. So my childhood efforts at Rebellion were primarily focused in nerdish directions. So that actually worked out really well. And yeah, that led to the Harvard connection, which is how we got to know each other.
Correct.
In my case, at the college. So young kid in Cambridge, 4 years, well, 3 years. I was there for 3 years. Soaking it up, having, in many ways, a great time. Interesting environment, especially for a teenager, and a great environment, in part because it led to, I really think it, for me, it was a helpful foundation for my career. In addition to introducing me to, at the time, it wasn't called big data, it was just called data.
Data, right.
Playing around with data, it led to working at the Boston Consulting Group, which I couldn't have, for me at least, and this is not for everyone, but for me, I couldn't have asked for a better job coming out of school because it was an opportunity to work with brilliant teammates on challenging problems. As a kid, it's amazing that they let me talk to global CEOs, COOs, other executives. And don't get me wrong, we had great partners, great leaders, helping us kids
Right.
not get too far ahead of ourselves. But it was a fantastic training ground.
I see. So when you joined at Boston Consulting Group, did you finish by then this MBA or going to be joining an MBA at that time?
Oh, this was straight out of college, and
Which from the Harvard.
yeah, and initially in London. So I also had the opportunity to go internationally, but then transferred. So there was the whole dot-com bubble bursting.
But was it in 2002 or 2003?
So I moved over in 2002, but the bubble, I remember the summer of 2001, business was super quiet. Things were all kinds of messy. I said, hey, can I take the summer off? I want to go study French.
Wow.
And they said, sure, we're happy to have you off the books for the summer. But things picked up again. I ultimately moved to the office in San Francisco, and BCG very kindly put me through business school at Stanford.
So how many years were you there at BCG?
Gosh, it was a while. Now it depends. 2 years of that was Stanford. A year was going and working for a client, also kind of post .com bust. A largely traditional retailer in the UK. Strong business. In total, it was over 6 years.
Wow. By then it was 2006 or 2000?
So it was 2006, 2007.
Wow, I see. You're almost about to get one more recession by then.
Yeah, and I left there, and being in San Francisco, being in the heart of Silicon Valley, having had at business school the opportunity to try my hand with various startup ideas.
I see.
Spend some time working with a great VC firm, Shasta Ventures.
I see.
Jason Pressman, love you, man. Terrific partner. Really helped me learn about the business, about technology. Would have loved to work there more, but BCG had paid for my business school. Went back to BCG, but in leaving BCG, I'd gotten that technology bug, and I'd gotten the startup bug.
Talk about the current role that you are at GoGuardian.
Absolutely.
And so I read about the GoGuardian, which is it's a very fascinating, is that it is more than 100 million revenue, which is a startup, no longer a startup anymore. And it's a unicorn company.
It is.
It is serving edtech community, and especially 25 million users, which is fascinating for me. Actually, 25 million users are using your product. So can you please talk about more in details about this GoGuardian experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm privileged to help build an ed tech company and an ed tech product that helps students, particularly K-12 students in the U.S., stay safe online. So Go Guardian as a company is comprised of two business units. So the core and what I'm responsible for is our safety and productivity business unit. This is, if you will, the OG, the original, the origin of Go Guardian. And I'm responsible for all the Go Guardian branded products.
I see.
The other division is curriculum and instruction. And that may be more what people think of when they think the ed side of ed tech. Fascinating, fast-growing, outstanding area and great products there. And my area is, yes, the lion's share of the business today, over $100 million business, serving, yes, over 25 million K-12 students with web filtering to ensure that kids aren't getting to unsafe or explicit content online, classroom management to help keep kids focused in the classroom, and student safety and mental health. So keeping an eye on what kids are doing online and looking for indicators of suicide, self-harm, or harm toward others. And what I love about this is, yes, the technology. So the underlying machine learning and, components within the browser or applications on the device that are able to monitor and observe and analyze what students are doing on these school-issued devices. But for a truly important need, whether ranging from safety, focus, and, well, lives.
I see. That's fascinating, right? Really fascinating to hear this, the impact that you have at a Go Guardian, that you have created an impact to K-12 students, which is definitely fascinating for us to hear.
It's my privilege to lead this team, and my role is general manager of safety and productivity, as well as VP of product.
Oh, I see.
And I can go into that more if that's useful.
Now, let me take a step back from Go Guardian to connecting back to BCG, right? So when you joined at BCG, and now fast forward, from the day one, have you ever imagined that you would be going in the direction of a corporate leader? Was it like, have you ever imagined in that? Because you said that you are building a next level of a business, but what was going in your brain is what I was trying to understand.
If I could spin a story that, oh yes, at BCG or at certain schools, you expect to be a leader of the world in one way or another. And I suppose I could argue that there's truth to that, but so much of what we do is influenced by who we surround ourselves with. And a lot of it was, gosh, this opens up to me these opportunities. I'm seeing, when I was going through school, I saw the seniors exploring these opportunities, going into technology, going into consulting, going into banking.
Right.
And I thought, well, I don't know what exactly I'm going to do, but I want to keep learning and I want to keep working with really smart people, and I want to be able to have an impact in the world. And so from that perspective, I knew that those were things that I wanted. I wanted to keep learning. I wanted to work with great people. I wanted to have a positive impact in the world.
Correct.
Many ways to do that. And BCG was a way to open that aperture and really start to learn about business. Especially at the time, something about my college, about the college was it was not so business oriented. So your experience is of Harvard Business School.
Yeah.
My experience is of Harvard and Radcliffe College.
Right.
in the late 90s, which was explicitly not vocational.
I see.
But that's what BCG did. It opened up this aperture of, this is business. This is businesses doing technology transformations, banks starting to really get online and figuring out how do they be modern businesses. And so that then teed up this idea of, yes.
So that actually opened the lens of business and the technology transformations.
Yes.
So that is where you started moving to next level of corporate gigs.
Exactly. And at the time, and I've talked at this point about the general manager portion of my role, which is a lot of it. The other key piece is the product leadership part of it, which I love both. I don't know. I couldn't put one of those above the other, as I can't put one of my children above the other.
I see.
The product leadership part is where I get to connect that commercially aligned strategy with roadmaps. What will we be building? What are the products that really meet these needs? And I should so connecting strategy to roadmaps. 2, driving delivery, because roadmaps are all well and good, but if we as an organization, we as a team are not delivering those offerings that meet the needs of our customers, we're not doing anything.
I see.
And team development, because as you noted, if without the team, we're nothing.
Right. That's core.
So those are the 3 key components for me of the product aspect of my role. That's not to say I don't get deeply involved in the development of folks across the organization. And a big part of what I see as my role in driving alignment is helping people to understand the extent and opportunities of their role, whatever type of position they're.
This time I wanted to ask you a different question about transformation technology leader, for example. For example, if you see any successful leaders, it won't be a rosy path to anyone. So I wanted to see the lens that you carry. The reason I'm asking this question is that, for example, let's say today, as an example, take Steve Jobs or Satya Nadella or any Google CEO. They have gone through the metal in their life. Maybe one time, or maybe 2 times, or maybe 3 times. That is where they are today, because they have become a great leaders today. So in your perspective, in your experiences, so I wanted to see those kind of a aha moment, or kind of the most happy moment that, okay, this is what it is. This is a medal that I have executed. Can you please bring those moments with your experiences?
Yeah. Okay, there's a few that come to mind. Something, I believe that curiosity is it's something I just do naturally. And I love, like I said, I love learning. But to feed curiosity, especially as a leader, it's critically important to foster psychological safety. And something that I did early on as a leader was not thinking too much about psychological safety, because I'd come up through Harvard, BCG. I had colleagues who, we'd go in there and we'd battle it out on the ideas, and nobody took anything, too sensitively. And then, gosh, I should have learned this before, but I was talking with someone in operations, and we tried something that I thought would work, and it ultimately It did not. And I should have known that. And I was talking with my project manager, Jess Rueda, best project manager ever. Shout out, Jess. And she said, you know, he knew that. And he was afraid to tell you. And I said, really? Well, why didn't he say something? He was scared. You're a VP. And that really stayed with me. And it's something that I honestly wish I had taken to heart sooner. Was the importance, and it wasn't that I didn't want to hear all the feedback, but so number one, as a leader, take all the feedback, welcome all the feedback. Feedback is a gift. And if you want that, you have to set up the environment that shows you want that. And for me, the first step was remembering to say, look, especially when I get excited or have a strong hypothesis, I will assert things. Assert hypotheses as if I know them to be true.
Right.
I don't necessarily. And so particularly when I was going into conversations with a team or an individual, this is a hypothesis. I just start out explicitly saying, this is a hypothesis. I want to hear what you think. And demonstrating to the team that I can and should be challenged, because that is the only way that we get to better answers.
I see.
Yes, great leaders are often right.
Right.
The bullet point to that is, and sometimes we're wrong.
Yeah, sometimes it goes in the same bucket.
So creating psychological safety, knowing how we come across, and that even if we intend to create psychological safety, we need to explicitly lay that out, especially for our more junior team members or team members coming from different cultures where it may not be as typical as it is.
I wanted to ask you a different question on that context, because the reason is that as we all emerging as leaders, right? So we always make some mistakes. Sometimes mistakes are costly, sometimes expensive, or whatever. The mistakes are mistakes, right? Because at the end of the day, every organization has to do multiple experimentations. So when you're doing multiple experimentations, have you ever encountered a situation where your decisions or your gut feeling, because you were right, because that's what your intuition is saying, right? But was there any moments where your decision making is being questioned by your team members, saying that, hey, Patricia, I think this won't work? Was there any kind of a conflict? And how did you come across those kind of situations? Because at the same time, they're questioning you, and it's you're questioning me. That kind of a sense of a personal level of, what do you call that? But was there any such kind of moment that you have experienced in your life?
Well, absolutely. So let me give you a very clear, fairly recent example from one of our GoGuardian products. I'll leave it a little vague about the specifics for sensitivity reasons, but for this product, it relies on machine learning, and one of the things, we had a lot of false positives, and that was a source of great frustration for our customers. And talking with our head of data science, brilliant PhD, he points out, we don't have a good feedback loop. We need a feedback loop. If we don't have a feedback loop, how are we going to make this better?
Yes.
Good point. That's kind of intuitive. So what we need is better feedback from our users on when something was a false positive and when it was a true positive. Okay, great. We had something like that, but it was kind of buried. And so his hypothesis, which I thought was wholly reasonable, was great. let's just make it easier to find. Netflix thumbs up. Yeah, okay. Let's give that a shot. My product manager, my very sensible product manager, said, I'm a little skeptical, but all right. If you want to, Patricia, Ryan, we'll give this a try. So he's smart. We do it as you should, as mock-ups, as clickable mocks. We put it in front of test users to see, can we design this thing so that people will actually give us this feedback? Long story short, no, they would not, because we're working with stressed, busy educators in a real-world environment. They do not have time to give us this kind of thoughtful feedback.
Correct.
And they told us that even in testing. And if they're telling us that even in testing, imagine in the real world where they're in schools with so many things to do every day. And that, thankfully, saved us from so much development time and so much wasted effort. We ultimately found other ways to get that feedback. But yeah, if I hadn't laid it out as, hey, let's test this hypothesis, or if I had been, yeah, let's go.
Let's just shift a gear to a different topic now. So the topic is all about, since this is my personal side also, I'm going to be adding, is that in Seattle, many people work in either for Microsoft or Amazon because they start their career from software engineer and then they become like a directors or senior directors. But there is always a kind of mindset in their mindset is that, okay, I can take this idea, I can build my own startup. So I've seen many people have transitioned from corporate to startup, but when they were doing some kind of a startup, I always foresee a lot of mistakes that they do because the fitment is a big issue. So I wanted to hear from you, because you had worked in a BCG and you have worked in a corporate America, and suddenly you shifted your gear to work for a startup.
Well, I can tell you.
So I want to hear your transition stage of how did you fit your corporate America into a startup mode?
Well, I'll just jump to the core mistake that I made was thinking I could do more than I could. I didn't take co-founders. I had some employees, but I didn't have co-founders. And that for me was the biggest thing that I missed, was having, strong senior colleagues and the opportunity to work together and bounce ideas off of them, and to have people whose strengths complemented mine. And hiring engineers as a non-engineer can be done, but certainly at that point in my career was not something that I was well positioned to do. We made it work, but I had to phone a friend more than once. And I think maybe that's one of the biggest differences between corporate life and a startup, is recognizing that you don't have that same built-in infrastructure
Correct.
that you're used to.
That is what I was trying to make a point out of this.
Yeah, it's so easy to take that for granted. Now, if I may transition and also say where startups have their unfair advantage,
Correct.
is the ability to focus and to say, presuming that they have, the right team, the right mindset. I have an idea. Let's go out and
Execute it.
and find that fit between the market need and our technology, our capabilities, and in that sweet spot, we will build a great company. And because they can go deep on subject matter expertise, on one thing, one customer, they can move mountains fast in a way that love you, Microsoft, love you, Amazon. It becomes so much harder to do.
Correct.
And Amazon seeks to do this with their single-threaded leaders and their two pizza teams. And I do think that's really smart. And what they're trying to do is replicate something that comes naturally to startups. I will, if I may, say that the happy danger for startups, like the on the path to success, one finds that product market fit. One excels in meeting that market need, and one grows and grows and adds new products and adds new customers and looks for other ways. What else can we grab? What can we add to this? And thus, it's easy to become a type of business that actually I really love, and with endearment call the overgrown startup. That's a place. Personally, this is where I like to live professionally, because I find I can add a lot of value to overgrown startups, and I don't think Advait, our CEO, would give me a hard time for saying that. Certainly, at the time I joined, GoGuardian had certain traits of being an overgrown startup, and great business, great customers, and losing some focus, starting to work on things that weren't hits with the market. Growing, adding engineers, great talented engineers, great talented designers and product managers, but then setting them onto stuff that didn't fit. So I focus, and I bring focus and clarity and alignment, which allows those startups to be successful unicorns, as opposed to multi-headed, confused creatures.
In Seattle, I personally met almost like more than 100 people in my office, and they come with great ideas, because these guys are all technology guys building a fantastic products which impacts the entire globe. All these kind of products at Microsoft or Amazon. Sorry to say this, because we are in the ecosystem of these big cloud companies in Seattle. So when these people come and ask some advices, and they always say that I am a great guy in terms of building technology, blah, blah, blah. So by the time they realize that the technology cannot be sold, it is too late for them, because they put too much energy to build a technology,
Yes.
but they ignore to sell the technology back to the target
The
customer.
tragedy. There's so much opportunity there. And sorry, go on.
Yeah. So the point I am trying to give a message, a point here is that, because I've seen it and you have been part of it, because now I can see what the answers that you are trying to say is that you have seen in the clarity of both building technology and
Yes.
selling the.
You have to find that Venn diagram overlap.
And in a easy way, I always tell to my friends or people is that instead of building technology first, find a customer first, sell customer, build later is what the idea that I always.
Well, yeah. I mean, unless you're operating in an academic world, or, to be fair, there are engineers who love tinkering and love tinkering's not fair, who love developing new ideas without necessarily knowing what will the application be.
Correct.
And it's only through those geniuses, not tinkerers, geniuses, that we get developments like large language models, artificial intelligence, the internet. And then that can be complemented with the aha moment of, oh, TCP IP can be used for all of these other things. And, oh, artificial intelligence. I mean, we're at the very beginning of artificial intelligence, but all of the myriad applications for that, how might we, and an area that I'm somewhat interested in right now is how do we develop artificial intelligence at the edge so that we can use it with very low latency? Anyway, but someone has to do that experimentation and that tinkering. And those aren't necessarily the same folks who are figuring out, here's how we might apply it. Now you put those folks together, that's where the magic comes from.
I see. Good. So I wanted to take you to another different topic, which is kind of a complex topic.
Please.
And since you have both a blend of startup experience as well as the corporate experience, and you have dealt with the small teams, with a small startup as a CEO, I'm sorry to say this, but CEO is not a chief executive officer, it is a chief everything officer, because that's where the nature of the startup. So you have done both this side and this side. And I wanted to ask you, because this is one of the toughest problem every organization is going through it, especially if an organization has a global unit, global entities and all the stuff. So if there is some kind of a change is needed, for example, if an organization is required to change, a transformational change, people within an organization always skeptical not to accept those changes. So I wanted to hear from your lens in terms of what kind of strategies that you can implement to make change so that people can embrace the new change and that is being accepted across organizations. So I wanted to, of course, this is a very broad topic, but I just wanted to hear your lens aspect of it. Is that, was there any such kind of moments, and how did you handle it, and how it is being reflected everywhere?
Yeah. So I think, the premise that you're laying out, as an organization, there is a clear necessity for a particular change, and there is a clear mandate from the top, and, if you will, a burning platform for why. I think first, there's an explanatory piece of this. Here's what we're doing, here's why we're doing it. And to the extent there is, hopefully metaphorically, in the case of certain oil companies, it has been literal, burning platform that drives a need for change, being very explicit about that. So I think back to a post-merger integration that I did for a large leisure company, where we'd always run things as separate brands, and there was a need to find efficiencies and find ways to ensure best practice across the teams. And to do this necessitated creating a shared services organization that had never existed before. Previously, they had been separate brands. And that was a giant change. Part one was showing, Houston, we have a problem here. We need to do this. And I'll draw a compare and contrast, because that part was actually pretty hard with this post-merger integration. The rallying cry that we tried for was, we need to get to double-digit return on invested capital, because if we don't, we're behind the competitors in our industry and we won't get investment. Floats over people's heads. Nobody cares. Did a little better with, if we don't get to these profitability numbers, we can't build any more ships. Okay, that got a little bit more interest. Different from pandemic, very clear, we have to shut these ships down. Now we need to figure out how we manage costs. Two different worlds. In the latter, change is still hard, but it's very clear why it has to happen. In the first one, you have more challenges. So to the extent you can make the necessity feel real for the team, that's really important. But just leaders talking about why a change and what the change is, that doesn't get bought in real well. What I've found makes a difference is celebrating successes, demonstrating successes, finding examples and stories and talking the heck out of them. So in the case of this post-merger integration in the cruise industry, one of the things we were doing was bringing together the purchasing function of these cruise lines. They had previously had separate purchasing functions. And strangely enough, when you're buying, say, salmon for many cruise lines, you get much more favorable terms from your suppliers than when you're buying it just for one. No giant surprise there for business people. But when you explain it to people, and we showed pictures, we showed videos, we talked about this salmon all day, and it saved $1 million. But in the grand scheme, it only saved $1 million. But it was tangible. And the individuals responsible who had negotiated those deals, who were on the front line testing the salmon, had great pictures and videos of those folks. We celebrated them. And by putting them on stage, on screen, and showing that they were doing well with rewards, in some cases promotions. I mean, not specifically for yay salmon, here's a promotion, but showing that this helped their path in their career, that made a difference. Because that's not just talk. That's putting your money where your mouth is, and it's buzz.
I see. But was there any resistance within an
Of
organ?
course, there's always resistance. And the way you overcome resistance is not just from the top. It's getting people telling these stories. Culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Right.
Yes. So what changes culture? In my experience, stories change culture.
Fantastic.
And getting tangible, meaningful stories for people, even if it's just the salmon. And as a leader, you might look at it, as the chief everything officer, you might look at it and think, that's just the salmon. But it's tangible, and it gets people talking, and it gets the next person to say, you know what, we could be doing group purchasing on these software purchases. Why don't we use one software platform? This is nuts. And there it starts.
So that stories, who will carry these stories, like a kind of a change agents, or?
You want to identify your champions.
Wow.
And feed them with these stories. And so your champions are both the people that you're celebrating who have successfully led these stories, and finding the folks who then start implementing, the person who then takes that example and runs with it and buys a software system, transitions us off of one set of software onto a common software platform. You then talk about them, and they talk about their success. And you find these folks, and you get the individuals who are being celebrated to talk, and the people who see them to talk. And you give them great talking points, even if it's just the salmon.
Wow. That's inspiring. Like a change, like
It sets a chain reaction.
chain reaction.
Because it shows that this isn't just the chief everything officer out there everythinging. And yes, I do believe that transformation offices can be transformational. But in many ways, their role is to support and provide the platforms. But the effective mouthpieces are not someone in a transformation office. It's the people in a hybrid world on Slack saying, OMG, I figured out how we can get off of this awful software onto some. Did you know that they use that? Let's do it.
Fantastic. So thank you very much. You're deep diving into the change management side.
It's my perspective. And obviously, it's one part of a much more complex change management animal. But I know that you know, well, you know all these things, but that folks are very familiar with, okay, you lay out your change plan and you set milestones and you say you will change. Go. But the piece that's often missing is the winning the hearts and minds, and that comes from celebrating the people who are demonstrating the behaviors you're looking for, and celebrating them.
So before we conclude this episode, I wanted to ask you one question in your life, because you have a personal front life, corporate life, and if you, through this platform, you wanted to give some kind of a gratitude in your life, people who really helped you to step up.
I'm going to limit myself, I think, to 3. I'm going to start with my mother, because without her, I would be nothing, both literally and figuratively. The things that she gave up so that we could move to the US and so that I could have the education and the upbringing that I did, extraordinary. I would shout out my art teacher, my high school art teacher, Dr. Mark Graham. This may be going in a strange direction for the interests of this podcast, but when I was a wayward geek in high school, he gave me the opportunity to he helped me really focus and find my center, in part through art, and in part through the fact that this artist, this commercial artist who also taught and had a PhD in studio art, he also decided to take AP calculus with the rest of us. And that made me stop and look at him and say, yeah, calc is great, isn't it? And then on a later basis, Professor Natalia Vinokurova, she knows who she is. She knows she saved my life.
So thank you very much, Patricia, for coming here and sharing your wisdom, stories, and your experiences. And definitely, this is what we are looking forward to hear from people like you. And we are looking forward to conduct many of these kind of sessions. Once again, thank you very much coming to our studio. And it truly inspired us, Patricia.
It's my pleasure, Jagan. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you.